Well, hello there, listener, and welcome back to The Road Back Home. This is Amanda. Myself and Melanie are both on a break at the moment. And so I thought that I would, as a little treat, revisit a conversation from a few years ago that I had with a mentor, somebody very dear to me, and somebody who has accompanied me through some of the darkest nights of the soul as such. This is Carmel Boyle, and Carmel is one of the spiritual directors of Chroí Wisdom Institute, where I studied for a diploma in soul accompaniment and spiritual guidance. It's rooted in the Celtic tradition, and it was such an incredible time for me. I began studying the year that my father died, shortly after he died. And then, hot on the heels of that, the pandemic came, and I was going through my own personal turmoil. It was a very, very tumultuous time in my recovery, and the whole experience was just a very intimate one. And I learned a lot from Carmel. I will be forever grateful to her. I've always said that when Carmel is in the room, God is in the room. She is my priest. And so a few years ago, before there was a podcast, was offering an online course. And as part of that course, there was a theme each week. And each week I recorded a conversation with somebody significant on my own path. And essentially, it was like a podcast episode, but it was done on Zoom. And I've saved those recordings. And so this is a conversation from 2021. And it's really interesting for me to listen back to it now, where I'm at, and remember where I was at having this conversation and where I had been in the 2 years working with and learning from and studying with Carmel prior to this conversation happening. Anyway, obviously this was before I was using microphones. Carmel wasn't using a microphone. I will do my best on the sound quality. It won't be the same quality as you're used to, but I will do my best to clean it up. But I really do hope that you receive this conversation in the spirit that it is offered. Carmel is a really incredible person to sit with and learn from and confide in and journey with. And so I offered this like a little treat episode that I hope that you'll enjoy. And in it, we refer to some poetry, we refer to some readings and bits and pieces, all of which will be in for paid subscribers beneath the usual. So if you want access to the details of what we spoke about in terms of like the specific poems or scriptures or whatever it is, they will be there. So make yourself a nice hot or cold beverage, or put your earphones on and head out for your walk, whatever you usually do when you're listening to a podcast. And I hope that you enjoy it. I am very, very excited and honoured to introduce you to Carmel Boyle, who is one of my very dear teachers, mentors, and also spiritual guides. Carmel, you have a very special place in my life, in my heart, and on my personal journey. And myself and Carmel met when on the night that my father died. I had, in the days leading up to his death, I had always had a very deep spirituality, but it was something that I kind of just kept to myself, I guess. I never felt entitled to explore it because I wasn't a good girl. I grew up thinking that spirituality you had to be a pious person or something to pursue it. But in the day and weeks leading up to my father's death, my spirituality was front and center of my life. And the night that he did die, I had such a profound experience that when I left the hospital that night, I was looking into the sky and I said, that's it. I'm going to find somewhere where I can study this, where I can explore this formally. And I did that same morning. So we're talking 2 years ago now, that's the exact same morning I didn't sleep. And I got on the Google machine and I found Chroí Wisdom Institute. And I made an inquiry pretty much straight away. And that's how we came to know each other. Carmel, you were the person who I had the conversation with when I came to the Institute. And as it turns out, you also have a show business background. So you actually knew my dad professionally, as well as everything else. But so that's where our story began, Carmel. And I became a student of Chroí under yourself and Geraldine's tutelage. And so I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself and let us know, what you consider your work in the world.
Well, I think, first of all, Amanda, it's quite amazing that you found us, because often people say you're a well-kept secret.
Yeah.
Because we're not very active on the internet or that too much, So that's where I see the providence of you finding us.
Yeah.
That you put out a request and somehow you found your way to us. And for me too, I have to say, it has been a real privilege journeying with you. And, the sense of you being ready and open for this part of the journey. And for me, I think for some reason, I was always awakened to the spiritual aspect and, kind of had it essential. But my work has been accompanying people who are opening to that. And I'm certainly, and I think you realize that with your journey with Chroí, that we don't consider ourselves experts, but having had experience of the particular journey that I've had through life, that maybe I can offer some assistance and wisdom to others as a companion who might have some wisdom to offer. So my journey, as you said, began with in show business or some way, but my spiritual journey began before that in awareness of the sense of something more in life. And whilst the singing was my particular channel for that, that is the thing that brought me, as I said, from young into show business, but it's actually the very thing that opened me spiritually as well, and kind of became more and more central in my life.
Yeah.
So I have a background and some training in theology, and I call myself a Christian Catholic as opposed to a Roman Catholic. That I am from the Celtic Catholic tradition, but I also realize that there is more even in that too. So that's why that would be my grounding. But I would be. I think I've taken such a long journey that I have encountered many paths, and I'm open to the truth that there are many paths to the truth, and this is the one that supports me on the way.
Yeah. I love it. As you're talking to me here, I'm remembering and kind of reflecting gratefully on the space that you and Jer create, and the invitation to experience spirituality that is rooted in Christianity and Catholicism and Celtic tradition and all of those, but to kind of reclaim this our birthright to faith. We claim our birthright to having a spiritual life and practice, and being people that consider, that there is allowed to have a direct relationship with that which is sacred.
Yeah.
and divine, and not needing to be perfect and not needing to pass some kind of priest test, like needing the approval of the priest to,
Yeah.
you know?
Yes. And it's very important. You mentioned the important thing there, creating the space of invitation.
Yeah.
I think that's what we try to create create the space.
Yeah.
The space where all can be put on the table. Where heresy can be put on the table, where your innermost secrets can be put safely into the safe space. And when a space is created, where a sacred space is created, it so much can happen within that space. That is mystery most of the time, and sometimes we name the divine as mystery. So by facilitating the presence to mystery, by creating a safe container where people can be themselves and explore themselves and not be judged and not have those priest questions coming out. It doesn't matter. You just pour out. And it's especially important for women. And that has been one aspect of our journey with our Chroí as well, is realizing, when it comes to spirituality, there has been a lot written about spirituality, but mostly, and written about women's spirituality, and mostly from a male perspective.
Mhm.
So it was very important for us to sit around as women and be theologians together, and talk about God, talk about our experience of God, talk about our coming to know who or coming to know the experience and explore the experience of divine presence in our lives and within us. So I think creating the space is really important for doing that. And I know you do that in your own work as well, just creating the space for people to pour out what is within them.
Mhm.
So as to be able to recognize what is happening here as we jump on this dice.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, as a part of the course here, our conversation is leading the way. Let's say this conversation here is at the mouth of the whale, and or possibly kind of giving voice to the belly of the whale, and also they trying not to drown in the first place part of the struggle of transformation. And Carmel, you have very much been with me over the last 2 years through the struggle of transformation, the resistance that I've had, the not wanting to die to myself, you know. Um, what can you speak again the quote from Saint Francis that I found to kind of inspire our conversation, please?
Yes. Well, the line is, it's in dying to ourselves that we are reborn, or that we're born to eternal life. And, I suppose it's the main theme of this spiritual journey is realizing that we have to let go. We have to let go. And it's a strange thing because we spend so much of the early part of our lives building up. And then when we get to a certain stage, we realize now we have to let go. And that's like going through the portal into spiritual growth, when we realize now it's very important to build up the ego, to get a sense of self. And unfortunately, sometimes in spiritualities in the past, that wasn't given attention. But it is important that we have a good sense of self, and that we have grown in all the other areas of our lives before we're ready to begin that spiritual journey of letting go. And I think one of the lovely examples, and I know in journaling with you, and you've probably realized in journeying with others, that we try to put it within a time frame, especially when we come to those places of darkness, because it's like darkness can be the portal. And I think that's what the phrase of St. Francis is, darkness. And it's the letting go, that the resistance to letting go that has us in that darkness, you know. And the letting go, we have a natural resistance to it because we've spent so long building it up, and now realizing we gradually have to let go. And it's very helpful, I think, overall in your life to practice letting go. To practice that, and that's why it just spiritual practices, all kinds of spiritual practices, but like in your life to say, what is a spiritual practice that helps me daily to let go? Because life is going to ask that of you anyway. So whether it comes in old age or whether it comes through, something that might happen, it's part of life. It is part of life. But when we practice letting go, it prepares us for the bigger letting go that happens as we journey through life. That's my sense, And I've sensed that, in journeying with people, that there's often, I think today, more the expectation of solving this.
Yeah.
That we have, I'm going through a difficult time. How am I going to solve it? I go to an expert who's going to take it away. I deny it. I blame somebody else for it. All the different, I blame the world, society for it, and have all these defenses that come up. But really, the invitation in spiritual growth is to be with it, and that is very hard. And that's why someone who will accompany you, not somebody who's going to cure you or take it away, but somebody who's going to be with you in it is very important. And I hope that that's something what I maybe could have offered to you or to others along the way, just be with you, to hold you in that.
Yes.
And it's so rather than trying to just get rid of it, to say, this is it, let's look in this, because you read a beautiful poem for me there earlier about the butterfly, going into transformation. We have to be patient with the time that takes.
Yeah.
I read a story, you've probably come across it, of somebody saying that they came across a caterpillar and they began to breathe on it, breathe, give it heat. And then the caterpillar began to, open up and become a butterfly. But the butterfly died very quickly afterwards because the breath had pushed it into being a butterfly too quickly.
Yes.
And with the pace of our world and just the pace of today, I think in general, our problem-solving attitude, whatever it is, that it's hard for us to have patience. I mean, we see it in daily life, or standing in a queue, you can see how we're waiting for a reply from somebody who sent an email. We feel that impatience all the time.
Yeah.
Transfers into our spiritual life as well, that we're trying to push things. There's a lovely line in scripture that says, in the fullness of time, things happen in the fullness of time. In other words, when it's the right time. But in the meantime, you stay with it, you hold your spiritual practices, whatever they are, and then you wait and you trust.
Yeah.
You trust in the fullness of time, and that the butterfly will emerge.
Oh God, there's so much I want to say, but one of the things that comes to mind is that there's no respect for the chrysalis in the world. There really isn't. It's like almost, as you use the word denial, a denial that exists. And transformation has been hijacked as, before and after culture, like as if, with not no respect for what's in the middle, but
a lot of violence in the middle in a different way. Like transformation is an inherently violent process in that it is destructive. Um, but there's something to be said about an intrinsically destructive, like destruction that is part of the natural cycle, and then this imposed violence of getting you into shape for your transformation, making transformation happen. As you said, they're blowing on the chrysalis or offering some kind of an after story that isn't yours just to get you out of the muck. So, uh, one of the things that I have, let's say, so I teach journaling, as you know, and one of the, I teach us this kind of like a bunch of practices that, when put together, it constitutes a journaling practice. Most of us think of journaling kind of like you think of reading a book, that it's something that happens from left to right and you start to finish. Whereas journaling is, it's happening in the book sometimes, but it's happening other places. It can be upside down, it can up, and it's not linear. But one of the things is that I always say is about being honest on the page. And that can be so threatening, to tell the truth. It can be so threatening that I actually teach ways of disguising your own writing from yourself, so that you don't have to be confronted with the truth, but you still get the catharsis of channeling it and putting it down somewhere. So, for example, let's just say you're angry with a family member, and it's taboo. It's taboo to express anger with anybody that you love. And we're not taught the skills of how to do that. And so we bottle it down and bottle it down. We never actually say anything. So I encourage people to write down like rants, but in a very scribbly way, so that you could actually leave your copy open and nobody will see it. You need to paint on top of that. And as you're saying there about having a practice that lets you practice letting go, definitely my creative practice is the thing that I always reckon everything that I do, and I let go. Several paintings on the wall down there that every now and again I just pick them up off the wall and paint over them again, and it's hard to do it because, if you get to a point where you're like, no, I like it like that. Like when I was 36, Carmel, I remember sitting in the car, I remember exactly where I was, and I passed by this spot every day. I was sitting at the traffic lights, and I said to myself, I felt grief because I said, everything is exactly how I want it to be now and forever. I want to hit pause. I instinctively know that I don't get to keep this. Now, where I was wasn't necessary. Like, I've done an awful lot of healing since then, but I was in a place of relative stability, let's say. It felt I'd finally landed on something for a while. Yeah.
But so where I'm getting at with this I'm getting to the place of holding, and in this phase, in this stage, this first stage, this sound like death and rebirth, or death so that we can have a rebirth. As you said, this holding, this space is really difficult one to step into. It's beautiful when you can find somebody or a community or a practice or something that can hold it. But I truly believe that in order to adequately go through the goo, like go through the depth, that you have to say the things you've been holding back on saying the whole time. You have to show the sides that would normally invoke shame. You have to allow your ugliness to be witnessed. It's very vulnerable. And you have definitely seen me wriggling, writhing, resentment, like all the bits that I would shadow, all the shadow stuff.
Yeah.
That I would prefer were never seen.
Yeah. I told it. I mean, that is the gift. That is the gift, really, to be able to say, this is all of who I am.
Yes.
And it's not just me personally. This is all of who we are as human beings. And I think we spoke one time about the Psalms,
Yes.
contained in the Psalms. If you remember with the story of uh, night, of what's his name, St. Brendan, and making his journey, and a man called Tim Severn, he made that same journey, but he didn't include an important aspect, which was saying the Psalms, because contained within the Psalms is every human emotion, even the ones that we would say we're ashamed of. I want to kill somebody. I feel anger towards somebody. I feel all the different things that come up that are part of our humanity. But that is the truth of who we are. Yeah. But it's how we hold all of that, and how we tame that, how we grow and grow in virtue, how we look into our shadow side and notice that, as Young says, it can be a golden shadow. Yes, in there we can find. So it's funny that Solomon is a very important time of the year, and it's the beginning of the year, isn't it? In the Celtic calendar, it's the beginning. So when something is signified as the beginning, it's also giving a hint as to how important this is. Going into the darkness. In other words, going into face the shadow, going into the cocoon. So like tradition, whether it's Celtic tradition, Jewish tradition, also begins. Say the Sabbath begins the evening before, begins in the night time. Yeah. A lot of them, we see that in much of the Christian tradition as well, that things beginning in the night time. So this is signifying how important going through this passage of night is. And for St. Brendan, going on the sea, and it's not only in the Celtic tradition, but other traditions, the idea of going on the sea under the night sky, this is our journey through darkness. And that's really important, that when we make that journey, that we have I'm familiar with a lot of saints. Like, they all talk about the kindness within. Okay. Kindness within. So whether it's St. Brendan or the Little Flower St. Thérèse, or I'm sure in other traditions, it's just I'm more familiar with that tradition, that they talk about the kindness within. And that kindness within isn't relying totally on the Lizzie stuff. It's relying on the true self, which involves the presence of the greater presence. So the sense of the divine presence that is deep within us, that gets filtered over with our shadow stuff. But it's actually deep within our dark shadow is that golden light shining. That's talking about in psychological terms in one way, but really that is the teaching of all spiritual traditions, which is recognizing that going through the sound time, going through the dark time, is actually where all that transformation takes place. That brings us to new life. And part of that journey, as you said, for St. Francis was, it is a dying that I'm born to eternal life, that I'm reborn. And what reborn means, that I'm transformed into something new, something different. And I think you made an important point earlier when you said when you were at those traffic lights, there was some awareness of something happening. But then you said, but I've had other healing since. Oh, yeah. So there is the sense that you're on a journey, and sometimes you're under the night sky, and sometimes you're under the sun. And when we accept that that is the journey we're on, rather than fighting it and saying, I want to be under the sun sky all the time, you say, this is life. I'm under the day sky. I'm under the night sky. And when I'm under the night sky, I have to develop night seeing. And John of the Cross, who would be one of the main saints, Carmelite, 16th century mystic, and he said that we have to develop night vision. We have to develop skills of night vision. And night vision is I understand, to be attentive to to what you see, to also see what you don't see. This is my interpretation of it now. You know what I mean? That when you're under the night sky, you don't necessarily see. When you're in the darkness, the path isn't clear. So what is guiding you is that inner pilot, the guidance stuff within.
Yes.
So that's what's guiding you. So the listening and being attentive to the night seeing is almost saying, see what you can't see with your eyes, see what you can see as the Saint Benedict was talking about the eyes of the heart, the eyes of the heart, the ears of the heart, the seeing with the heart.
Really.
And another thing that happens on these journeys on the sea is that we go from island to island. And that's what I'm saying. You were on an island at those traffic lights. And then I'm sure you can name many other islands that you were on, but each island is like mapping that spiritual unfolding for you. Like the butterfly. I think that's a nice way of speaking of spiritual growth, to say spiritual unfolding.
Yeah.
And unfolding also means that you're not going towards something that isn't already there. If you think of the unfolding of something, you're pulling back and you're finding what's actually beneath it.
Yeah. So revealing.
You're revealing. So, the transformation that you're seeking is already within you.
Yeah.
And uncovering it.
It's like a process of subtraction in a culture that has kind of brainwashed us to think that addition is the way.
Amanda, you always name things so beautifully. I wish I said it that way. But at it, you have a wonderful capacity to bring things together, and that really is true. That is absolutely true.
Yeah. That moment, I'm coming up on 10 years since my traffic light moment where I was just like, everything as it is right now, I don't want it to ever change. And I know now, like I wasn't in where I was then was that, there was healing to be done, but right now the unhealing wasn't hurting. I was like, safe, and even there's that period where you're safe in your unhealed state, like it's just where the dysfunction is working for you right now, but it wasn't sustainable. But it's just
you do need to take breathers on a journey, and about Saint Ignatius talks about experience of consolation and desolation.
Yeah.
So that was a moment of consolation. So to, receive that moment and be in that moment, and then in the fullness of time, when the time is right, then to allow yourself to move into other places.
And that moment was 4 years. Like that was a 4-year moment between 36 and 40, and then 40 was when it was like the caterpillar was like, you know what, like I'm tired. The crawling needs to stop, and the catalyst became, I didn't actually realize until I looked and examined, kind of like stepped it back and said, what was the, not that there was an event or a moment, but I'm saying that I do think that turning 40 put a restlessness in me that led to me making a certain amount of choices that picked at the fabric of how things were and unraveled.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened.
And that's wonderful that happened and that you were aware of it. Sometimes these things happen and we miss it. And it's a shame to miss it, because these moments, we were talking earlier about space, creating space. These moments are the divine opening of space. The moments of loss, moments of breakdown of relationships, losing jobs, age, the process of age. I noticed that that's opening something in me now, and when I'm beginning a new phase of my life too. So these are uh, moments of the divine opening space within you, and you can either close it down or go into it.
Yeah.
And spiritual traditions teach us that to go into it is much more beneficial to us in the long run.
Mm.
Yeah.
I definitely went into it though, Carmel, thinking I could be cute. I went in, I had a few things smuggled in my backpack. That kind of way I was like, like injecting vodka into the oranges at a festival. Like I might have called it upon myself, but I definitely thought I could trick it. I thought I could hack the system.
Yeah.
I thought
But
I
it
could.
could have go along.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
intention, and beautifully, you opened this our conversation with a kind of acknowledging of my intention. You're saying, that we were hard to find, and I was smiling to myself because I was thinking, well, that is the power of intention. It was my intention to find you, and I am such a believer in intention, and it's a blessing when intention comes into my life. It animates desire in a way that is
Yeah. Yeah.
the ball in motion, and I know it's inevitable. Once intention comes in, the inevitability is there.
Yeah.
The terrifying intentions is such an important part of this process too.
Yeah. Just having intention can hold you through the dark times.
Yes.
Having intention, I think two things I would hold in the dark times. In other words, having the intention, which you name as desire as well. It's that having my desire is to whatever way you want to name it. And then the other thing I would hold is trust. So that while I'm holding the intention, I'm also trusting that the intention is holding me. You know, that something is holding me as I am in this place.
Mhm.
And that's why I think it's Thomas More. Thomas More, he has written The Dark Night of the Soul, I think it's called. And he talks about different experiences of dark night, but he also says how important it is to have a philosophy of life that holds within it the darkness.
Mhm.
If your philosophy of life is that I'm going to be happy, 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 it's that's not life. See, philosophy has to allow for failure. It has to allow for times of darkness. It has to allow for grief and sadness. Philosophy, but and then also that balanced with a philosophy of life that holds trust, that holds love. You know, so that if you have a philosophy, just capturing it in a few words, and my philosophy of life is that I'm just throwing out, that no matter where my journey takes me, that I am held in love.
Mm.
That opens up to the good times and the inevitable struggles of life. And then if you want to name that more specifically and say, well, my source, my divine source is love. So I'm held by my divine source, love.
And love being a much more, I don't want to say passive because it's not passive, but it is a much more passive thing, and than the kind of love that you might could be. I think a lot of us confuse love for approval, acceptance. We could, that love is not that. Love is not attraction. Love is not lust or desire or yearning. Love is, and as you've said so many times throughout, is presence. It's literally, um, like anybody who has a pet, I think, has, like the embodiment of love, the way like that. Now I know that our pets can kind of pick up on our neuroses. Like my dog is I did not realize how much of an anxious person I was until I was like, what's wrong with you? Well, um, but in other words, like the fact that my dog just doesn't have an opinion on my life and how I conduct it.
Yes, yeah.
Presence with me.
And love, pouring love towards you, no matter what, and no matter how you behave, no matter what's going on for you. There, I had a Labrador. I think they might specialize in that. I'm not sure, but they just pour love towards you, and they want to be close to you. And it's a lovely. I think one of the best homilies I ever heard in my life was in a Black Baptist church in Georgia. And the homily was all on about how endearing a dog is, and how our relationship with God can be like that, that just that pouring out of love, unconditional love, whether you're in good mood or bad mood, no matter what your thoughts are, once that connection has happened, then it's unconditional love. That's, and that might be an important thing that I'm saying as I'm hearing myself saying that, the connection, the connected. And I think that's where our spiritual practices come in. They grow this connection, they make it stronger. And this connection with however you experience divine source. I know religion has kind of muddied things for us around language. And we've had this conversation, many times around language. But whatever way we name where we've come from and the energy that is holding us in love, we want to build on that. We want to keep connected with that. And that's where our spiritual practices come from. And, what is wonderful about what you do, and I hope we offer something of that too, is that one of the key ways to that is through art, in whatever its form is.
Mm-hmm.
Our darkness, our dealing with shadow, needs to be put out, and not in a cerebral way, in a creative way. And if we, whether, again, whatever saints, people who are examples for us in the spiritual life, we see that they had creative ways of expressing. John of the Cross, his own whole theory around the dark night of the soul was expressed in poetry. In Hildegard of Bingen, with famous woman saint, she expressed in mandala.
Yeah.
Or she expressed her dreams and her visions in mandala. So the expression, song, poetry, anything that puts it out in a way that is not just speaking it out.
Mm-hmm.
It used to have more power than just talking, and yeah, and so I think the what you were talking about there earlier, helping people to express on paper in whatever camouflaged way, that helps. That helps to do it in a camouflaged way. But for the person themselves, putting it out from here and out from here, through your hands, whatever way, that is putting it out rather than things being stuck inside you, they just causing you more pain. So your pain needs to be expressed through art. Whatever, whether you consider yourself artistic or not, whatever way. In other words, putting it out in a way other than just thinking it out.
If I could name that myself, I would name that as encounter.
Yeah.
A way of encountering your experience as a compassionate witness to yourself. The first time I experienced compassion for myself was in a sand tray exercise in which I encountered myself in a struggle outside of myself. And there was absolutely no other way I could feel towards the me in the tray than deep compassion. And that was transformative.
Yeah, that's that's beautiful and true. It is true. And that's the gift of art, putting it out there and letting it speak back to you.
Yeah.
That was, it's not just about creating something, it's having a conversation. It's like an inner conversation, isn't it? But yeah.
It's so profound. If I could wish anything for everybody, is that they could be facilitated to meet themselves in a way that taps into that love, that divinity. Because there is no other there's no other way of feeling. It basically, what you're doing is you're leveraging your own humanity, directing it towards yourself, the last person you would think to give it to, the last person we tend to give it to. Because we're too close, we're too close, but it's not until you witness and our creativity, whether it be by imagination, in the sand tray, in the journal, it is a way, as you said, of externalizing and creating that encounter in which only compassion, it's the only appropriate response. Do you know that beautiful poem by Naomi? Is it Naomi Shai? It's kindness.
Yeah. I'm not sure that I do, but
It's very much about that. It's, by the time you know what kindness is, you've been through, it's kind of like by the time you know what kindness is, like, in other words, kindness is the only appropriate response to a person in, in need of it.
yeah. And Amanda, we talked several times because of your beautiful name, Amanda Grace, about grace.
Yeah.
Like that was a graced moment for you to be able to be open to compassion. And, for some, they haven't, it's difficult to open to grace, And I think that's why when you're working with art as you do, the intention that you mentioned is very important because the intention says it's saying it whether I can do it a reality or not. And this is where sometimes we have our stated and our operative. And the thing is that we want our stated to become our operative. So we continue to state it. I know if that makes sense, sir. But what I'm saying, you keep saying this is my intention. My intention, and this is to I'm stating my intention is to open to grace, and I will apply in that way. Don't want to break it, but my intention is to open to grace here. And I may not be able to do it this time. I still state my intention. And then maybe as I continue with that practice, and I think that's why we speak of spiritual practices, we have to keep practicing. So when I begin a process like working with art in some way, and I say my intention is to open to divine grace for the sake of my healing, And if I state that the first time, I may only be able to say that in my mind. If I practice it, I might be able to say it out loud. If I practice it again and again, it becomes more a reality for me. And eventually my heart opens to grace. And that creates the space we're talking about where the divine touch can reach in there and open you to compassion, to healing, and to trust, to forgiveness, to whatever those, virtues are that are going to bring you into more wholeness, that are going to release you into being above the sky.
There's something to be said as well, in my own experience, of getting to a point of accuracy and authenticity and alignment with intention, with your intention. And one of the things that you definitely helped me do was to name my intention, because I was having trouble naming my intention. Remember, I wanted healing in my relationship with my body, I couldn't seem to name that intention outside of a dieting mentality. And every time I tried to set the intention, um, even if I would disguise it as I want to be healthier, it still was it was a um it was a covert, it was like it still did not feel like it felt like the kind of intention that were the agenda. The agenda still was to correct my body. And I remember the process, that we went through in that I was doing so much work saying, like, what do I think I'm going to get from that? Like, what do I really want that I think this is going to give me? And we kind of, um, we talked that through and worked it out. And I was doing all my journaling and everything. And you helped me name the intention to feel at home in my body. And that as an intention became something that it felt it felt kind. The feeling was visceral. I could feel it in that it was an intention that I could actually keep checking in with, and not that it didn't have teeth. It wasn't like the other intentions I had was like a dog that kept biting every time I'd try and pet it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, Amanda, the word that's kind of becoming a thread in our conversation here is space.
Yeah.
So with your intention to give it space to broaden out. If your attention is so narrow as to say, my intention is to lose weight and get on a diet, giving it space, saying, well, I saw Tara Brach, you're probably familiar with Tara Brach, and she was say, okay, my intention is to lose weight, go on a diet. What's beneath that?
Yes.
And then whatever your answer, what's beneath that? What's beneath that? So as we move beneath, there's a spaciousness that happens. And so you get to the core of what it is you need to heal, or what it is that you need to open to. So it became then, my intention is to be at home in my body. And, if you take that down, my intention is to have a sense of that wholeness in myself, so it's even beyond your body.
It was so powerful for me, because what happened for the first time ever, Carmel, is that having that intention made what I wanted or needed accessible in the moment, because I can choose to be at home in my body today. Whereas it's like if my intention is to get back into my wardrobe of 3 years ago, I have to wait and go through a horrible, like it's a carrot at the end of the stick, and it's never available to me. And so it's an impossible to meet need. It's really a really violent way of being with yourself. Whereas the intention to be at home in my body has been so much more kind, because I get to have that relationship now. I get to be experimental now with that. So what would help me feel at home? What would a person at home in her body do with this?
And practice that. Begin the practice of being kinder to you in your body. Be kind, being compassionate, just being kinder.
And I see as well that it had made me an outlier. I'm like a radical now, because I'm a person at home in her body who shouldn't be. And I felt like saying, because I encountered, no, I didn't encounter, it wasn't an encounter. Today I was going to the shops. This is just a tiny thing, but this is how big it can be. And I met a person in this town who, does not like me, and in the past has attacked me, Now there's nothing going on. There nothing has happened in 10 years, but I hold my breath when I see her, And so in the last few years, I knew that part of me would be holding my breath, because she's a bully, and she's the kind of person who would use. So I had gained a lot of weight, and I was fearful, because all she'd have to do was call that out, and I would be wounded and mortified. And today I saw her, and I felt the old familiar
clenching happening, and I adjusted myself, kind of thing. But then there was a part of me who ran it through. I ran the scenario through where she shamed me, and I was standing there in my mask going, sounds like a you problem.
Yeah.
It really was, because the difference being is that I have decided to be at home
Yeah.
in this body as it is. And, opinions about that.
Yeah. I think what's important that you said there was your second thought. The first thing was it was bothering you. And I think this is where the practice can really kick in more quickly with practice, so that you were able to then let your second thought be something different, something more positive.
Yeah.
And I think, and that can go either way. And that's why we have to watch our second thought all the time, because the second thought can be, okay, stand back and say, okay, I am comfortable in who I am and I'm going to stand with confidence. My second thought can also be to build on the negativity. And that's what I think it's in Buddhism, they refer to that as the second arrow.
Okay.
Like, what's my second arrow that's giving me more pain? So to be alert to your second thought, bringing you into more wholeness and fullness, rather than bringing you into deeper pain.
Yes.
And you have more control over your second thought than you have over your first thought.
Yeah. Oh, this morning, it's just so interesting to have it happen this morning, where I had that thing happen. And I was like, but I was reminded of my intention. I was like, that is not like, if my intention still was to correct this body, I would be way more vulnerable in that situation. Or I'm somebody who goes swimming in the lake. I'm in a swimming togs in public every day. And the reason that is something that I can do without a big drama around it now is because I'm clear on my intention. When my intention was to change this body because I believed it to be wrong, well, then I was more likely to be shamed about it and hyper vigilant to who else would. But that's not my intention. So my intention is to be on my body, and that's what I'm here doing. So if you have a problem with that, it's definitely a you problem. And I feel sorry for you, actually. Me getting all like,
Well, I think to pause for a moment and really think in what you're saying there, because to celebrate the journey that you've been taking.
absolutely, it's been huge, and you've seen it.
It's not an easy journey.
No.
But it takes courage, and you had the courage. It takes stickability, and you had that.
Yeah.
It takes openness, and you had that. So just naming those things as what really helps us when we're going through, our spiritual unfolding is happening all the time, but there are periods when it's challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And to have a container, you at the very beginning of our conversation, you mentioned the whale. If we read the story of Jonah and the whale, the being in the belly of the whale was like a container for what he was struggling with, And so even coming to something like spiritual guidance or spiritual direction creates that container for you to be in the belly of the whale.
Yeah.
When you're feeling as you feel, so it contains it for you in the rest of your life until you're ready to be birthed out. Until you're ready to be reborn, which is a dying that we're born to new life. Or reborn.
Yeah, the whale is a big symbol for me.
Yeah.
But bringing our conversation full circle, the theme, as you say, is the space and the containment. The chrysalis. In this poem, it says the chrysalis is essential. And what is essential when everything is stripped back, what's left is essential. And that is the chrysalis. And we can understand that as the protected space. And as you're saying, all the things I've had, what I've always had, I've been so privileged to trust. And there's something about me I've reflected on this a lot, and I think there's something about me, birth home connection is, I don't know if it's easy or if it's natural or if it's just something, it's a quality that I have that I'm able to connect and seek. And I'm really good at finding my teachers, really good. And I have gotten good with the discomfort of being held. And I've had such incredible holding. And when my dad was dying, I felt that on a cosmic level that we as a family were being held. It was our mantra through the whole thing. We're being held. Like when the ticket machine in the car park didn't work for the person in front of me, and then it worked for me. And I was like, and then it didn't work for the person behind me. I was like, and it's a ridiculous example, but I was like, thank you for holding me in this moment where I actually couldn't take the stress of that not working.
Yeah. But I love that the the holding right down to the practicalities of your life.
Yes.
And that's where for me I have this sense of being held in the divine embrace. That's how Julian of Norwich would speak about being held by God. That sense of being held in divine embrace, being held in love, being cared for. And I love the way you said at a cosmic level. So something bigger is holding us.
Yeah. And if we look for it as well, we will see that, that the holding is happening around us, and we can still ask for more active holding, and we can go seek more active holding. But it really does help me to see how, the passive holding is happening. And I'm starting to develop a real awareness of the degree to which, even things like, another example, my eyes are open now, and I could, because I'm training myself in this abundance. So today, again, entering the supermarket, this is seconds after the last thing that happened. I'm never not working on this. Never. I'm always seeking evidence of that which I want to believe. And so I walked into Super Value and I had no coin for the trolley. And as I was at the door, I spotted it straight away, the unchained trolley. And I was like, he did. It was just that moment where another thing that I didn't have to deal with, that unchained trolley. And I had a smile on my face and I was like, see, everything works out for me. And that's what I'm developing now, is this idea. Everything always worked out for me.
And to be able to hold that when you find the trolley that you don't need the money for, but also when you're going through the blindness of the darkness,
No trolley.
you're the same. So still trusting that presence and holding you in all the ups and downs, but being able to celebrate the ups and trust we're down.
Yeah, even when there's no trolleys, to be like, okay, well, maybe not to finish.
But noticing and acknowledging and be grateful for what you notice is really important attitude to have.
Carmel, possibly about on Chroí, Wisdom as an Institute is online, and you often offer some retreats as on Chroí and sometimes as Carmel Boyle. I will share your whatever links that you have.
Well, yes, I do offer retreats online, but I often forget to advertise them, put them on the website. But anyway, I have a number of retreats, and in fact, I just had a 4-day retreat last week with a work, and so yes, I love that work, and we do have the training program in spiritual guidance and in supervision. And then I offer retreats, and Geraldine also offers her own continual professional development sort of workshops as well.
I want to thank you, and it is a privilege to introduce you to my community, and for them to be, to just spend this time with you. And I hope that they feel what I feel when I'm spending time with you.
The privilege, Amanda, is mine. Every time we meet, the privilege, the sense of privilege that I have of being able to journey with you at a deep level, it really is a great privilege. And I think it's true. You know, the reason why you're able to accompany others is because of the journey you've taken. And I hope that that's what has contributed to I being able to accompany you, is the journey that I have taken, with its own ups and downs and imperfections along the way, but all honing, I hope, for the work in the world. And I think you said to me, your lovely car there this morning, and you had a line in there that I wanted to just speak back to you. You know, I am deeply grateful for your work in the world. You know, and that's what I would say, that we are, each of us, involved in the kind of work in the world that has to do with building up, and that has to do with healing, and that has to do with creativity, and bringing people into recover who they truly are. So, thank you.